You've heard the song 1,000 times. Whitney Houston turned it into one of the biggest recordings in American history. Every karaoke night in the country has heard someone attempt it and fail. It has been on every wedding playlist, every farewell compilation, every Songs That Make You Cry countdown since 1992. But here's what most people don't know. I Will Always Love You was not a love song. It was a goodbye, written by a 27-year-old woman to a man who had made her famous and then refused to let her go. A song she sang directly to his face in a small room because she couldn't find any other way to say what needed to be said. And when he heard it, he cried, and he told her she could leave. And then 5 years later, he sued her for $3 million. This is the story of Dolly Parton and Porter Wagoner. And if you've never heard the full version, sit down, because this one's got everything. Before we get to Dolly, you need to understand who Porter Wagoner was, because a lot of people have forgotten, and that's not right. Porter Wagoner was not a side character in this story. He was, for a long stretch of time, one of the most powerful men in country music.
The old hometown looks the same as I step down from the train. There to meet me.
Born in 1927 in West Plains, Missouri, grew up dirt poor, started performing on local radio as a teenager, worked his way to the Grand Ole Opry, and by 1960 had his own nationally syndicated television show. The Porter Wagoner Show ran for over 20 years. It was broadcast on more than 100 stations across America every single week. In an era before the internet, before streaming, before any of that, 100 stations meant everyone watched it. Farmers in Tennessee, families in rural Georgia, working people all across this country who tuned in every week like it was church. He was tall, charismatic, and wore the most spectacular rhinestone suits you have ever seen in your life. He was not a novelty act. He was a serious businessman who understood that in Nashville, relationships were everything and loyalty was currency. In 1967, his female vocalist left the show. He needed a replacement, someone with a voice that could hold its own next to his, someone who had the spark. He found a 21-year-old girl from the mountains of East Tennessee who had been writing songs and knocking on doors in Nashville for years without much to show for it. Her name was Dolly Parton, and the minute she opened her mouth, he knew. Dolly Parton grew up in a one-room cabin in Locust Ridge, Tennessee, one of 12 children. Her family was so poor that when she was born, the doctor who delivered her was paid with a sack of cornmeal. That is not an exaggeration. She has told that story herself more than once, and she tells it without shame. She was writing songs before she was 10 years old. By the time she graduated high school, she had already performed on the Grand Ole Opry as a teenager. The day after graduation, she packed a cardboard suitcase and took a bus to Nashville. She believed with a certainty that the people around her did not always share, that she was going to be somebody. For a few years in Nashville, she was mostly nobody. She got some songs recorded. She wrote for other people. She got a few small cuts, but the big break wasn't coming the way she expected it to. Then Porter Wagoner called. He offered her a spot on his television show, a touring contract, a record deal with RCA, and a salary of $60,000 a year, which in 1967 was real money for a girl who had grown up with nothing. She said yes. She moved into his world. And for a while, it was everything she'd ever wanted. For 7 years, they were one of the most successful acts in country music. They recorded duet albums together. They won CMA Vocal Duo of the Year 3 times. The show was pulling in audiences that most artists today would trade their entire career for. They were a team. But from almost the beginning, there was a tension running underneath all of it. Porter Wagoner was used to being in charge. It was his show, his name on the marquee, his relationships in Nashville that opened the doors, and he operated accordingly. He made decisions about her performances, her songs, her image, her schedule, and he made them the way men in that era were used to making them, without asking. Dolly Parton was not built for that arrangement. She was grateful. She genuinely was. But she was also somebody who knew, bone deep, exactly who she was and where she was going. And she was not built to sit still inside someone else's vision of her future. She started asking for raises. He bought her gifts instead, necklaces, rings, a Cadillac, and told her to consider that her raise. She called him a male chauvinist pig, not behind his back, to people, on the record. By the early 1970s, they were fighting constantly. Two strong-willed, passionate, stubborn people who each believed with complete conviction that they knew what was best. The difference was that only one of them was right about Dolly Parton's future, and it wasn't Porter. By 1973, Dolly Parton had made up her mind. She was leaving. She had originally agreed to stay for 5 years. She'd already been there for 7. Her solo career was building. Opportunities were knocking. She was ready. But telling Porter Wagoner she was leaving, that was another matter entirely. She knew it was going to hurt him. She knew it was going to be a fight. She didn't know how to start that conversation without it turning into exactly that. So she did what she always did when words failed her in real life. She went home and wrote a song. She sat down and asked herself, what do I actually want to say to him? What's true? And what was true was complicated. She was grateful. She did love him, in the way you love someone who took a chance on you when you had nothing. She didn't want to hurt him. She just couldn't stay. So she wrote, I Will Always Love You. Not a romantic song, a professional farewell. The most gracious, tender, honest goodbye she could construct, saying, I appreciate you. I respect you. What we had was real, but I have to go, and nothing, not guilt, not obligation, not your feelings or mine, is going to stop me. She went to his office the next morning, sat him down, and sang it to him right there in the room. He started crying. When she finished, he told her it was the prettiest song he had ever heard, and he told her she could go, on one condition. He had to produce the record. She agreed, and in 1974, the song went to #1 on the Billboard country charts. Porter Wagoner produced the record that was written to say goodbye to Porter Wagoner. If that isn't country music, nothing is. Dolly left. Her career didn't just survive, it exploded. Here You Come Again crossed over to pop radio. 9 to 5 became a cultural moment. Movies, television, sold out tours. The girl from the one-room cabin in Tennessee became one of the most recognized women on earth. She did it exactly the way she said she was going to. And then, in 1979, 5 years after the goodbye, Porter Wagoner sued her. $3 million, his claim that she had breached her contract by leaving, that the departure had forced him to cancel tours and lose income. And this is the part that stung most, that even though she had left the show, he was still her manager and was entitled to a percentage of everything she had earned since. In other words, I made you. I own a piece of you. Forever. Dolly Parton, by 1979, was not a woman who could easily write a $3 million check. The lawsuit was a serious threat. It was also a deeply personal act. This wasn't just about money. This was about a man who felt that something had been taken from him, something he had built. And he wanted it acknowledged. She settled. She paid around $1 million to make it go away. Her response, in her own words, was one of the most Dolly Parton things she has ever said. I made up my mind that if he could live with it, I could live without it. That's a woman who has decided she's done being angry. Not because she didn't have a right to be. She had every right, but because she had better things to do. Here's where this story refuses to be simple. After the lawsuit settled, something shifted. The bitterness started to drain out of it. They began to speak again. They recorded a reunion album in 1980. He appeared on her television show. The hardness between them softened. Porter Wagoner said in a later interview that the feud never really became what the press made it look like. He said attorneys have a way of making people who care about each other look like bitter enemies. He said he had nothing but love for Dolly. In 2007, a few months before Porter Wagoner died, Dolly Parton performed at the Grand Ole Opry. She sang, I Will Always Love You. Porter Wagoner was in the audience. He wept. She was with him 2 hours before he died. At his funeral, she led an all-star choir in I Saw the Light. She has never stopped being generous about what he gave her. She has also never pretended that the fight wasn't real or that she owes her freedom to anyone but herself. Both things are true at the same time. That's the honest version. You might be thinking, this is a country music story from 50 years ago. Why does it matter now? Because what happened between Dolly Parton and Porter Wagoner wasn't just a music industry dispute. It was something that millions of women in that era understood from their own lives. A woman talented enough to be indispensable. A man powerful enough to control the terms. A system that treated a woman's ambition as something that needed to be managed, contained, directed by someone else. And the price she had to pay, in patience, in years, in eventually $1 million, just to own her own future. Porter Wagoner was not a villain. He was a product of his time. He genuinely believed he was looking out for her. A lot of men in that era believed that. But Dolly Parton understood something that he never quite did. That gratitude and freedom are not the same thing. That you can love someone genuinely and still refuse to belong to them. And the song she wrote about it, That song eventually generated more royalty income for Dolly Parton than almost anything else she ever recorded. She famously turned down Elvis Presley's request to cover it because his management wanted half the publishing rights. She said no. That decision alone made her millions over the decades. The song Porter Wagoner cried over, produced, and let her take became one of the most valuable copyrights in American music history. She kept every penny of it. Porter Wagoner made Dolly Parton a star. That part is true, and she has never denied it. But Dolly Parton made herself Dolly Parton, and there is a difference. The greatest goodbye song ever recorded was written by a woman to a man who was holding on too tight. She sang it to his face. He cried. He let her go. And then the whole world heard it and thought it was about a lover. It was about something harder than that and more human. That's the story of Dolly Parton and Porter Wagoner. If it makes you want to go put on that song and hear it a little differently now, good. That's exactly the point. Thanks for watching. Drop a comment and tell me, who do you think was right? And if there's another classic artist story you want us to dig into, let us know.